Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the People's Court. No doubt the last 6 to 8 weeks have been some of the most momentous of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, we've seen our country change. We've seen the political landscape, the civic landscape really come alive. We've seen young people asserting themselves, insisting that, and if I may quote one of them, they do not simply settle for a seat at the table. They want a place in the kitchen. They want to cook and craft and contribute to the national cake, that they wish to be drivers of their own development, of their own growth and change of the society. But ladies and gentlemen, in this period as well, another subsector of Kenya has come into focus, and that is our public institutions and their roles and their effectiveness in pursuing and implementing their constitutional mandates and roles. That and so much more is what we have in store for you this evening, and we have a wide variety of people here to share those insights with us. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the guests that we have with us tonight. But first, allow me to introduce my co-presenters for tonight's program. We have, of course, Linda Alela. Linda, would you take over and introduce our good friend George?
I'm glad that you say we look at the institutions in the country, and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is one of the institutions that, or perhaps one office that we'll be looking at. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, as well as other institutions that are mandated to address some of these concerns that Victor has highlighted. And we have representatives of the same right in studio. And so before I allow George to introduce the guests that we have, Karibuni Sana, like Victor says, the lines are open for you to interact with us. I have the SMS short code line right here with me, 22047 is that, and I'll be looking at some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast. So please keep us busy, let us engage, because these conversations are important, not just to us that are in studio, but to you back at home. George.
Indeed. Welcome. You're watching The People's Court. I'm George Maringa, and on this end I've got a section of our panelists tonight, and because they comprise of the young people, and as we always say, they want to be part of the table, and they say that they speak their mind. So I'm going to hand it over to them to be able to just introduce themselves, beginning with the wonderful lady over here just next to me.
Thank you. My name is Tatiana Njenga. I work with the Kenya Human Rights Commission. It's a pleasure.
Karibu Sana.
Thank you. My name is Don Evans. I'm a constitutional law analyst and a public policy enthusiast.
Good evening, my name is Angelina. I am a youth and nature consultant.
And of course,
my name is Kazmal Makaure. I'm a Kenyan, an active citizen, all the above, and I'm happy to be the People's Court.
welcome.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the panelists on my end, and we of course invite your feedback as well on X, formerly Twitter, at TV47 News, at Muyakane, at Linda_Alela, at George Maringa, use the hashtag Daily Report, hashtag People's Court. These are the ladies and gentlemen on my side. Linda, whom do you have?
All right, here we have Victor Juma Owiti, who's seated right next to me, if I'm allowed to say that, and he's a Principal Prosecution Counsel, or DPP, of course, that is the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. And we also have Festus Kinoti, who's a lawyer under IPOR, that is Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Gentlemen, thank you so much for creating time to be with us. The biggest question, I know we'll be talking about Maandamano, we get to hear your views on the same and all that, but there seems to be a lot of questions as to just what really some of these government institutions play as a role, such that we will appreciate and get to hear the position of IPOR in times when, of course, there's been excessive police engagement and all that with the Mwananchi, especially during the Maandamano times. We equally are going to hear the ODPP, prosecution of cases and all that. But all in all, nothing much seems to be, experienced in terms of progress. So if we are going to put them under one umbrella, Owiti, and talk about the government institutions and their roles, what would you say?
Thank you very much. Good evening, Kenyans. To answer you directly, I think a lot is going on, contrary to the position you seem to have that nothing much seems to be happening. I think the problem is a publicity problem, that what we publicize mainly are things that go wrong, which is understandable, but a lot of things go on behind the scenes. A lot of prosecutions go on, a number of convictions, including, I must say from the onset, against police officers. Only that probably I think there's blame on our part as government institutions that we don't seem to let wananchi know everything that goes on.
Should wananchi be let, should they be allowed to know? Is it?
Exactly. That's why I'm taking that as a blame on our part, that we don't seem to be doing enough in terms of letting the wananchi know everything that we do. We try to publish what's going on. And we also think that mainstream and social media, especially mainstream media like yourselves, would also play a bigger role in just helping the wananchi to know a little more than we know, so that the general populace would understand that other than the little that they get the snippets of, there's lots that actually goes on behind the scenes.
We had extended our invite to representatives of VACC. Unfortunately, they're not here, but we agreed that we're going to engage them on a later date in relation to the same. But coming to you, Festus, what do you make of these government institutions and their roles?
Good evening. First of all, I'm very glad to be here. And just to echo what Owiti has said, a lot is actually being done by government institutions. And like he has said, publicizing it is probably a challenge. But there's also some that is being done that cannot be publicized at that point. I'll give you an example. For instance, with regard to IPOA, when we conduct investigations. As we are conducting those investigations, there are certain aspects that we cannot publicize because they would then affect the investigations being conducted. Okay? So there is a lot being done on that side, but some of it is not out there visible, but some of it has also not been reported, actually. Like Victor has said, a lot of convictions that are happening, a lot of cases that are in court that people don't know of, and this is a challenge for government institutions to actually take these now to the social media spaces also to make it known.
All right, all right.
Shiko is online.
Yes, we are joined by Shiko Kihika. Shiko, can you hear us? Good evening. How are you? Shiko, good evening.
Good evening to you. How are you?
Well, suffice it to say, we have her, and she will be joining us a little bit later on. But I'm interested in I understand she's available. Shiko,
right.
Good evening.
We can hear her in studio.
Shiko.
Good evening.
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Shiko Kihika, who's the Executive Director at Tribeless Youth. We shall be connecting with you in a moment. But I have a question, and I have a question for that side of the room. And I want to start with Ms. Njoroge. And going round, I want your views on exactly what you think of the performance of Kenya's public institutions, particularly the ones we have represented here tonight. Let's give it a timeline. The last 2 years, for example. Let's start with you, Ms. Njoroge. Give us a scorecard.
Interesting question, and I think I'm going to rely more on recent history. ODPP has been in existence since the 2010 Constitution. That's about 14 years. IPOA, 13 years, right? And I think the only case that has been successfully, and I stand corrected, successfully finalized is a Baby Pendo case, which took 7 years. If you look at the recent mandamanos, the protests, the police have been coming in masked faces. Their vehicles have been covered. The number plate has been covered. And in the recent CS interviews, the nominee CS Interior, who is the immediate former CS, said that the police who use live bullets do so through, they make a personal decision to do that, not through orders from above. And I'm concerned as a Kenyan, wondering particularly about the conduct of police officers. Usually, police officers who are part of the disciplined forces, these are people who follow the rules. These are people who follow law and order. And as I sit here as a Kenyan, my concern is this a new Kenya where police officers just decide to shoot and they shoot. We've seen those same police officers. There's one who's been captured firing at journalists, and he's back on the streets. Nothing is done to that person. So I'm concerned, and I wonder, 14 years later for ODPP, 13 years later for IPOA, I'm not sure they inspire confidence in what they do. They say there are cases they cannot reveal, but I'm also curious. They revealed the one for Baby Pendo because it was successful. Maybe they will mention it. What else? What other case have they successfully finalized other than Baby Pendo case? And also, what is happening? Why do we see police officers who are masked coming to these demonstrations? Why do we see police vehicles, number plates covered? I mean, what stops goons from posing as police officers? And if I am in trouble, the person I ought to go to is a police officer. They come in plain clothes. How do I identify a police officer if I am in trouble? So I think those are my major concerns, that things seem to be deteriorating, basically. So they don't inspire any trust. And I worry about the trust between the citizenry and the police officers. I think it's continuously eroded. Making reference to the case in Muranga, where a certain village out of Muranga town, there was a murder case, and the community engaged police officers in a 6-hour battle until the police officers gave up. And that tells you that the public trust has been eroded. So I worry. I'm honestly worried about these two particular institutions. I will not talk about the rest because they're not here, but I want to make reference to IPOA and ODPP.
All right, thank you. Mr. Makoure?
IPOA and ODPP are headed by jokers, just well-dressed men doing nothing but serving interests of the powers that be. Because there's no way, even in the vetting of the CSs, suddenly we have letters being backdated and people being let loose. These are people who Kenyans categorically stated that we do not want these people in cabinet. One of IPOA's role, if we were to summarize it, is to investigate the deaths and serious injuries that come from the police. But it's the same. Remember, this is a country that on paper has a police service, but in practice has a police force. We are yet to make that transition. We find the police service on their social media handles asking us to submit videos. So what is the investigative role of such an organization? We find that these institutions, in their decade or so of existence, have existed only to serve the whims of the political class. These are institutions that are used to settle personal scores amongst the powerful in the country. I cannot give them a score because it would be unfair to subject them, because I wouldn't want to be as pessimistic, because I would give it to them to the negative. And I'm doing this not as an exaggeration or hyperbole, in the sense that their role does not, or their mandate, as much as they look very flowery on paper, these organizations do not work for the regular Kenyan. I will give you a case in point. Today, we've had several community people's assemblies. These things were well documented, these things were raised, and I keep on saying that anytime that these people say we were meeting communities, these were not demonstrations. But you find that at Kasarani Social Justice Center, the armed plainclothed officers not only dispersed the crowds violently, but also invaded the offices. But we are told that these people, when they do these things, they act on their own volition. But remember, this is a state organ. All the people's assemblies in Dandora, in Mukuru, in Mlango Kubwa, there was a comrade called Comrade Lea, who was arrested today. And it was very flimsy. Their phone was confiscated, and the police went through the phone, and we had to find ways to release her. So these are institutions that are supposed to be pro-people. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering that when they have one case, that one case, they tout it and they shove it down our faces. Then they look at us and they tell us that they have a PR problem. They are functioning in a government which has not overcome the campaign stage. So they do not have a PR problem. So these two officers should not lie to us that they do not have the mechanism or there is an integrity issue that they are protecting, because a lot of the policing that has been done in the past 8 weeks has been done by active citizens. Therefore, according to me, I have not a sliver of faith in these institutions.
All right. Ms. Janga?
Yes, please. I'd speak on behalf of CSOs and myself because I'm very disgruntled. In all honesty, you find that these things are very well laid out theoretically. They're good on paper. These institutions are well written off. As Kasmo has said, they do have the able leaders. However, when it comes to the ground, the practical application of everything that they need to do is not being done. Yeah, I'm of the view that they've actually failed Kenyans, if anything, because we've had so many killings in this short period of time whereby we've not had any raised convictions of these police officers who have killed people. And we're reaching a point where it's becoming a norm, which is very unfortunate, yeah? And we also want to see some sort of change in regards to the prosecution of these graft cases. Yeah, we're finding that a lot of these graft cases are being withdrawn. We're calling it prosecution aided, yeah, cases. So you find that if these cases are being withdrawn at that level of the ODPP, as a common wananchi, me who raises a normal case against a criminal, what's my certainty that this is going to be followed through? Yeah, if I report a police officer, what's my certainty that it's going to be followed through to the end? As one of our counterparts has shared, a lot of police are finding their way back to the streets. How sure am I that if I go to the streets to demonstrate on this day, which is ascertained in the Constitution, will I go back home safe as I should? But it's not well laid out in anything. If anything, it's not being applied as it should be. Fine, we do have the laws, but the laws are not guaranteeing our safety as Kenyans. They're not upholding our rights as they should be. Yes.
All right. And of course, Mr. Ndong, and as you do that, would you care to tell us what does the Constitution say concerning these public institutions, and particularly interested in the subject of their independence, like IPOA, for example? Talk to us about that. Talk to us about what the Constitution provides for and the protections and everything for these institutions, and whether or not they're actually living up to the spirit of the Constitution.
Thank you so much, Victor. I think I need to first begin by saying that the history and the background of independent offices, and it's not about only EACC, it's not about only DPP, it's not about IPOA, all the independent offices. The reason why Kenyans thought it wise to establish an external mechanism of dealing with specific things like police excesses is because the government, the Kenyans, when they were enacting the Constitution, they were alive to the fact that government institutions by themselves are not self-contained, because you see, power has to be constrained in one way or the other. We have to get an external mechanism of ensuring that independent agencies of government, or those who are in charge of state power, are constrained in terms of how they conduct their affairs. So that was the understanding. The understanding of all these independent offices was the constraint that they had to put on power. Now, let me begin with IPOA. I think I'll deal with each of them. Let me begin with IPOA. The Independent Police and Oversight Authority was formed as a result of Article 244. The Article 244 envisages that the National Police Service would have the highest standards of professionalism and integrity. So then there was need to come up with an authority to ensure that the police excesses, there is an oversight watchdog on police excesses. And that is how we came up with the Independent Police Oversight Authority. My assessment of how the authority has operated for the last, since it came to being, I think, on or about 2011 or so, is that the Independent Police Oversight Authority has not lived to the constitutional mandate, that we gave it. Remember that this authority is there notwithstanding that the police themselves have an internal mechanism. The internal audit unit is there, which receives complaints on police excesses internally. And then we have the IPOA, separately outside there as an independent authority that is oversighting police. So for me, I think the challenge that IPOA has had is that I've read a number of their reports. They give annual reports, they give reports after 2 years. Most of the recommendations that IPOA makes are as a result of the welfare of police officers. They think, I've seen all their reports are centered around welfare of police officers. For them, they think that the best mechanism to deal with police excesses is to deal with issues to do with the welfare of police officers, is to deal with questions about their salaries, remuneration, and things like that. But there is a point they are missing. The point they are missing, I think the investigative mandate of IPOA is on its deathbed. Because as my friend Caswell did say a few minutes ago, how does IPOA, for instance, we saw just, I think 2 weeks ago, IPOA called a number of families of the victims, of those who died during the protest. I was very shocked that most of them came on TV, on live national TV, or the chair said they have received the complaints, and some of them came on TV, on national TV, and say, you know, I am ready to give my testimony. How do you expose, for instance, how do you expose witness? Some of them, sisters and brothers to those who were deceased, potential witnesses, are on TV saying that they are ready to give their testimonies, they are ready to give their witness statement. That itself is a potential danger. That itself is a potential danger. So apart from them saying the issue is on publicity, the issue is not on publicity. The issue is the competence. Is IPOA having a mechanism, for instance, where when the protests are on, they have their investigators on the ground? Because remember, Victor, that IPOA has capacity, institutional capacity, to have independent investigators. They don't rely on DCI. So when David Chege's intestines and head is being spilled outside Parliament, and IPOA says that we need to tender evidence, when their mandate is to go out there and do the thorough investigation, because they do not expect the police officers to testify against one another. For a long time, we know what is called the blue code silence, where you find that police officers don't testify against one another. It is something that is known. So we are calling on IPOA to take its investigative mandate seriously and stop focusing on police welfare and all these other things. For the DPP, Victor, for the DPP, the problem with the DPP that I've noted, they have thoroughly done a good job. They have done a good job on certain areas. We've seen convictions, because for me now, I follow a number of their cases which they have achieved convictions. The problem with the DPP is that when there are high-profile cases touching on the political angle, they abuse their discretion. And this is not me saying. Justice Sifuna has been on record releasing a number of judgments and saying, you cannot withdraw this case. You laid a basis upon which you began this case. At this point, you cannot come to court whimsically and decide, oh, today, I woke up from the left hand of the bed, side of the bed, I am withdrawing this case. The problem with the ODPP is the way in which they have exercised their discretion. Their discretion to continue and discontinue cases has always been used for political reasons. And I can give you examples. The reason why it becomes a problem to believe the ODPP, we don't know if they drop one case today, it's genuine, and tomorrow it's not genuine. The reason we don't know, we cannot determine, is because the timing of such withdrawal. If you recall the 2022 cabinet, vetting, closer to that vetting, or immediately after the vetting, you saw the cases of Aisha Juma being dropped. We saw the one for the KRA chair, Mwaura, being dropped. A number of them. The timing. Again, here we have a letter coming when Oparanya is about to be vetted. The timing of the letter does not speak to us, to a body. Of course, they can discontinue at any time.
No.
The problem
they
is
attempted to substantiate the reasons as to why they withdrew these cases. Perhaps they are also going to speak to the fact that, well, we have seen them speaking in different sides of the mouth. And of course, that indifference between the ODPP as well as the EACC. But then before we get into the nitty-gritty details of that, allow us to loop in Shiko, who is also online, so that she can say something quickly before we take a quick short break. If you can hear us. Can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you.
All right, your view in relation to what it is that we are addressing, that is, of course, your feeling of, whether you have a feeling of satisfaction or an element of, confidence, regarding the government institutions that we're talking about tonight.
Unfortunately, we lost hope in these institutions long time ago. And this is not even inspired by just this protest, but we've seen it happen again and again, where they've either acted blind towards whatever is happening, or rather they've just decided they won't care about it just because it's not someone in government who's on the other side of the pain. I think my colleagues in the studio have mentioned that, especially for IPOA, most of these cases, we saw them coming out clearly to say there's no video evidence. They also clearly came out to say the families are not reporting. Yet most of these things, some of these people were shot live on television. So I do not know what kind of evidence they were looking for, or I do not know if they're not well equipped to actually go look for proper evidence like they seek. But just looking at the cases, I honestly do not believe we need these institutions. I do not believe they're serving the purpose they should serve. I just believe these are a bunch of people or a bunch of Kenyans who are earning good salaries to just sit in those offices and do nothing about. There are also cases where we've seen innocent Kenyans being prosecuted. Those are the easiest cases you find in court. Unfortunately, when we have people we can actually hold accountable and people we can actually arrest, they do not do it. They do not deal with fellow police officers. They do not deal with fellow criminals in the name of police uniform. They do not do these things intentionally. So unfortunately, as a young person living in Kenya and as a person who pretty much engages in cases that are dealt against, or rather cases of police brutality, I do not think I believe in any of these institutions at all.
All right. I think it's time that we take a quick short break. Ladies and gentlemen, allow us to take a quick one.
The gentlemen here have been making copious notes.
We're looking forward to see them respond to all that.
After the break.
Mm-hmm.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do
the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
All right, welcome back to the People's Court. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been following our discussion, we're looking at Kenyan public institutions, and we're trying to see if they're actually as effective as, well, let us know what you think about their performance, whether they've served you, whether there's been questions about trust, questions about independence. Send in your questions, feedback through the SMS line, which is on your screen, and would my producer care to put the WhatsApp number as well, so that we can sample your feedback and extend your questions to our guests.
Indeed. Now, looking even at the issues that have been raised before you proceeded for the break, of course, Dong was speaking, and then later on, Shikub. I want us to go back to Shikub. Shikub, if you can still hear us. When you look at, the advocacy and what has been said over the last, couple of days, Nane is coming up in just about 2 days. In terms of advocacy and calling for change, do you think that the messaging this time is a bit more structured so that then the institutions that are mandated by this constitution to be able to carry out some roles would then be able to say, fine, our TORs have been enumerated further, then we'll be able to do this and this, in as much as the Gen Z, the young people, the protesters will be agitating for what they want?
Judge, the message has always been very clear. Kenyans have said they do not appreciate the corruption in the system. Kenyans have said they do not appreciate the people we have in the cabinet. Unfortunately, it seems that we might probably want to start speaking to these people in their local languages for them to understand us, because I do not think they take into consideration anything that young people say. Messaging is still as clear as it's been before, maybe clearer than ever before, because the message is one: we do not appreciate the people you still put in cabinet. And this conversation, by the time people are going to the streets, was not a conversation about bringing the political cons and the political kingships into one side. It meant Kenyans wanted better structured systems. So the lie of suspending people and then reallocating their positions is something that does not sit well or settle well with young people. And this is why young people are saying we are going to go out, and not just go out, but we are planning to camp until our voices are heard. So I think just listening to this for me is, I do not think by any chance young people were not clear. I do not think by any chance that advocacy was done in a wrong manner. I do not also think by any chance that it was too complex for them to understand, because the demands were very clear, the demands are still very clear, and they are just the same, because nothing has changed really. Just that people are now saying it's either you listen to us or we're going to come here, and we're going to be here until you listen to us.
Shiko, before I let you go, yesterday, on the show last night, we had Gathonio Mushomba, who has been, of course, a supporter of this. But then one of the opinions that she had is that the young people, if they really wanted, this change to specifically occur, you then go to the institution that then makes the laws, because cabinet, the president will say, fine, I'm just implementing what parliament has brought to me. Do you think that then to even give teeth to be able to, for these institutions to bite and be able to do what is required, do you think that then it needs to, the focus, whereas there was Occupy Parliament, then there needs to be a situation where there is more attention on that institution, so then the laws are made in a manner that enhances and gives the powers that should exactly be done, because over the years during the implementation of this constitution, we've seen that the ODPP, IPOA and other institutions, EACC, have asked for prosecutorial power. So as it were right now, these institutions are not able to quote unquote prosecute. That role is left for ODPP. Should then the focus go back to Parliament in a more significant way?
I'll say this, and it's so worrying to hear that a member of Parliament is saying that, knowing very well that Parliament serves the briefs for the president, and also knowing very well that even when people directed all their energies to Parliament, they thought that young Kenyans are not going to do anything, and that's why Occupy Parliament happened. So for me, from where I see it, is that where the energies are being, all these people, including the president, are people who are meant to serve the people. And we know very well how the Parliament of Kenya operates. Our Parliament is full of greedy people who, by any chance, if they are paid to pass a certain bill, they will not want to read through it. So we know for sure that these people hold briefs for the president and not for the people as they're supposed to do. Ideally, Parliament would be the perfect place to go to. Why? Because they are the people's representative at the national level. Unfortunately, we failed to see that in our Parliament. Unfortunately, we failed to see people who actually understand the people. Unfortunately, we just have arrogant, ignorant human beings there who are being paid by our taxes to hold brief for the president. And I think people are right by directing these to their seniors and the people who give them the direction. People are right by saying to the president, you know what? We said we do not want the finance bill. You said you've suspended this, but now we are seeing cuts that are going more into development than the austerity measures we spoke about. So when people direct their anger to these people, it's because they are also being paid by people's taxes. They are also people's servants, and they should be just doing that. And we have also acknowledged that our Parliament needs to be dissolved because it's not working for the people. It is also illegally constituted. But at the same time, it's a Parliament full of people who do not also understand their TORs, as it seems.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and I think you'll have now IPOA and DPP, respond to this. And I think I'll begin with you, IPOA. When you look at, the investigations and how things are going, in as much as find the abductions and everything else, we've seen the 7, I think, files you've forwarded for prosecution. But even if you look at the bigger picture, some who have been victims, something as simple as taking someone's phone, the right access to information, right to information, taking someone's phone and then, being able to flash it, that is a subversion of the Constitution. Are you also looking at such, or are we then looking still at the grandiose picture to be able to say, fine, abductions and killings, but even the macro and the micro still matter?
Thank you. Yeah, to your question, first of all, we go back to the mandate of IPOA with regard to its investigative mandate. IPOA is mandated to investigate both criminal offenses and also disciplinary misconduct by police officers. Mm-hmm. So when you say macro and micro, IPOA investigates both, investigates all of it. And over 5,000 investigations concluded is not nothing to date. I had, and I think this is good feedback we are getting on our achievements and what the public institutions have done. And I think this is very good. I think all public institutions should have a forum whereby they get feedback from their stakeholders and from Kenyans, in fact, with regard to how they are doing this. For instance, we've only finalized one case, the Baby Pendo case. Shows you we need to communicate more. Over 30 convictions done. Just this year, over 5 convictions. Just this year, 2024, over 5 convictions of police officers based on IPOA cases. Over 5,000 investigations done. Over 900 cases in court of police officers, not just Baby Pendo. And I can highlight a few. And you see, and I think the reason why the Baby Pendo keeps coming up in this discussion is because it touches on a key issue that IPOA brought up with regard to its investigations, command responsibility, with regard to police officers in public order management. And that is something that IPOA and ODPP came up with regard to holding police accountable. Now you had something else, I think, was raised with regard to police officers having masks, covering their faces and hiding their identity. Why are they doing this? Because they are scared. Scared of what? Being held accountable. By who? By IPOA. Why? Because they know the history of IPOA investigations with regard to what the investigations have unraveled and police officers who have actually been held accountable. Do we need to do more now with regard to what is emerging with regard to how public order management is now shifting and emerging? Yes, we need to do more.
Have to take this protest where,
Forgive my rudeness, but those men who are in those masks and with those vehicles whose number plates have been obfuscated are nothing but fearful. When they lob tear gas at innocent protesters, those people are nothing but fearful. When they shoot at innocent protesters who are not rioters and looters, those people are nothing but fearful. Those are people, because as a police officer, as an officer of the law, you know very well that this is not something that you're supposed to be doing. So I think fearful is manipulating the language because they are not afraid of accountability. These people seem to be acting from a particular command because if they were not, they would not be allowed on the streets, because then the state which reserves the monopoly of violence then will push any other Tom, Dick and Harry. If tomorrow I decide to wake up and wear a mask, I can get into the streets and wield a gun. So these are not people who are fearful of accountability. That's not, I doubt it is fair for us to refer to it as fear of accountability.
Why does it continuously happen?
Right, even after we've raised these concerns as citizens.
What is done
yes.
against these officers? And of course you know them. You know the vehicles, say, from Central Police Station, who were on duty that day, which vehicles were being used, which police officers had covered their faces. One was even unmasked by the citizens. So you know them. What action have you taken? And this is something simple. This is not even killing. I'm not even going to ask you about the kills. We're going to talk about investigations and failure to operations
Right.
of other institutions.
Right.
But this one of covering their faces and masking their faces and vehicles, why does it continue to happen?
All right, and perhaps to build up on that, beyond the Mandamano, on other occurrences, we all understand just what is the role of IPOA. I mean, does this then get to achieve what it is that needs to be done? Of course, looking at your explanation there, and as well responding to, the great concerns.
Yeah, and I think there are valid concerns that are raised with regard to what is actually transpiring and what is happening. And as I've said, and as I think IPOA has put out, IPOA is actually investigating these instances. And which will tell you here, the process of investigation is not that simple.
Mm-hmm.
To actually have evidence and to do a file that which here can take to court is not that simple. Mm-hmm. It is a file that has to be meticulously developed such that it can reach the prosecutorial threshold of beyond reasonable doubt.
Should we argue that we have structural challenges and concerns and systems are not in order? Because if there is something as evident as the death of an individual, and perhaps, Rex Masai, for instance.
On camera.
And, give it to them. They go to levels of even giving you information about specific.
Including phone numbers.
Right? So I mean, what are we telling, the masses? What are you telling the citizens when you say, and we all agree that the investigative processes are not as easy as we might want to imagine?
Yeah. And exactly as you've said, but it's not really just structural issues. Okay, it's a process issue. Like in the case of talked of Rex Masai, which investigation we completed and forwarded our file to the DPP for purposes of prosecution. And the DPP identified a few areas that should be covered, which we are currently doing. It is a process, okay? It is not something that, for instance, I'll give you an example. If you take a video, for instance, okay, of an incident and you post it on social media, okay, under the Evidence Act, okay, the person who took that video is supposed to do a certificate to certify that they're the ones who took that video and what they were using to take that video was actually functioning. Now, with that certificate from that person, that evidence becomes difficult to produce in court. You see? So it is a legal process with regard to how evidence is collected. It is a certain process and it must be adhered to. And therefore, while it is possible to say there are videos out there, for instance, the process now of taking that evidence and putting it in a file that can go for purposes of prosecution is very different in terms of law.
Can present video evidence from CCTV and random photos, and then when they realize that they've misrepresented things, they issue an apology on Twitter. Because that's now, if we're talking process issues, then we need to understand that if these processes are only limited to IPOA, or they're also limited to the entire police, to the police organs, because then we will have to decide that if there are people who have to follow the processes and some are exempt from the processes, because the DCI has done the exact same thing. They did not have certificates. They presented faces of people who were harassed by Kenyans because they were connected to crimes and they were connected to certain destructions of property. Then they recant it, not even in an official apology, but through a social media handle.
And the irony of it all, maybe, is when the government comes out to say that they're in the process of trying to trace the so-called goons that infiltrated, or perhaps that they got to hijack this process. In the process of finding the goons, just how difficult would it be to identify some of the killers of these individuals that we're talking about? Maybe you should come in.
Yes, allow me to jump in.
If you may, I'm sorry, just before you do, I believe he has a point to respond to what he said, what she said, and what you asked.
I'd want to add something before he even responds. I'm sorry. Because I'm just...
Yes, please, Shiko.
I just want to understand, when we're asking for certificates for people who took these videos, are we talking about the same country where witnesses disappear overnight and they're found dead in some river?
All right, fair enough.
And in fact, my question was very, very simple. It's on the conduct of the police officers. I'm not even going to talk about death because you're going to tell me about the process of collecting evidence. For me, my question was simple. Uncovering their faces, masking the number plates, them coming in plain clothes. What action have you taken? Why do they continue to do this when you exist? That was my very simple question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's your response to these?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. So, for instance, with regard to police officers not identifying themselves, the IPOA has written already to the National Police Service, on this issue of police officers not identifying themselves. Because the law requires that police officers, for instance, in public order management, wear uniform and wear their civilian clothes. If they are going to arrest somebody, they identify themselves. That's what the law requires. And IPOA has written to the National Police Service to ensure that this is actually implemented. Remember, the agency that's supposed to implement this is not IPOA. It is the National Police Service that's supposed to implement this, not IPOA. It is the National Police Service. And what IPOA can do is, if now the National Police Service fails to implement this, and we are able to get evidence of particular police officers, we can now recommend prosecution or disciplinary action against those particular police officers. And that investigative process, that investigation is a process. But with regard to implementation, it is the IG and the National Police Service who are mandated under the law to implement it, not IPOA.
Mr. Kinoti, hold on. Mr. Kinoti, just on that point, picture this scenario. We have a police officer who's in plain clothes, allegedly a police officer who's in plain clothes, has not identified themselves, and they've snatched a person off the street in full view of everybody and in full view of TV cameras. Okay, we've seen that. There's many videos of that. Okay, so they are clearly contravening something. They should identify themselves, and they should be, if they're in plain clothes, they should identify themselves, as you say, and they should be in uniform. They're contravening something, right? And you're saying it's not your job as IPOA to, you've written a letter to them,
that's it.
but it's the purpose of the work of the police service to enforce that. What stick, what deterrent method can your office do? And it's actually constitutionally mandated to do, to make sure that this doesn't happen. How many officers? You said 5,000 concluded investigations, over 5,000, and over 30 convictions, over 5 this year, you say. How many of them have been on police officers contravening just this one bit about identification? Just this one bit. How many of them? Since the protests began, let's say 6 weeks ago, how many? Do you have a file like that?
On concluded investigations or on...
Ongoing and concluded.
Ongoing investigations are ongoing. And ongoing investigations are not only with regard to deaths, serious injuries, but also minor infractions. Those are ongoing investigations, as it were. Okay?
How hard is it to push that, to give him a file? Have you given him a file for any of these officers? Just on the subject of identification, just that protocol alone.
But first of all, we must back up first of all. to do that, that's why I'm saying, to do that, you first of all must identify, like you said, you've seen somebody being dragged and put in a vehicle, isn't it? You must first of all conduct investigations and determine, is that a police officer in the first place?
But people did.
Okay?
Members of the public did. They
But
even
they're
said,
also using the police
from this
vehicles.
police station, his phone number is this, all of that. And these are civilians.
And I'm giving you that, to be fair, you should allow us to answer the questions.
No, but I'm trying to get him to answer. Your time is coming.
Yes,
Please.
I'd like to ask.
Please. Yeah, so like I'm saying, you have first of all to conduct investigations, okay, into these cases. It is not just you pick up a file, download the contacts from the social media and present it to the Director of Public Prosecutions. So the first thing you do as IPO, and I've said IPO has done it, is to write to the National Police Service, to the IG, to tell him, don't do this. Police officers are required by law to do this for implementation, because that must be stopped. And it can only be stopped at that level, okay? Then, now for the individual officers, for purposes of disciplinary action, there are two entities that are required to do this. One is the Internal Affairs Unit, okay, that takes disciplinary action against police officers. And if the Internal Affairs fails to do this, then IPOA oversees the mandate of the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service. Am I clear about that?
Okay.
So that is the process in which it follows. First of all, the National Police Service has to do its job by stopping it. Then the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service that deals with disciplinary issues has to do its job to identify these officers and follow on disciplinary action. If that now does not happen, IPOA then can come and oversight the role and mandate of the Internal Affairs Unit of the National.
Is there a timeline to it, to such investigations?
There is no timeline set in law.
So, to be clear, but do you understand? And
but I get what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
I get exactly what you mean when you say timelines with regard to doing these things and the urgency of doing them. That I completely understand. But that is the process in which that must happen, and those processes have to be followed because they are the processes that are set in law. But it's not something we are saying that these things should continue. We also know it's not right, and that is why we have written to the National Police Service to, in fact, adhere to that. And today you had the statement by the National Police Service on this, telling police officers they must identify themselves.
Victor, let's allow
one more question.
Allow Kinoti a brief as well.
One more question to Kinoti.
Let us just disband IPOA, because if IPOA has a secretarial role, if all IPOA does is just write letters, we can write letters on Twitter, we can type them. Let us save the country money. Just type on Twitter.
Okay. Now becoming unfair. Unfair.
Victor, proceed.
Yes. 1 second, we're coming to you, but an issue has to be allowed.
No. But even then, if people jump in to add questions before we answer them, it's unfair. That's what I'm saying.
Sir, I'll have you know something.
It's not unfair.
It's the people's court.
Hang on a second.
You don't have to be here.
It's accountability.
Sir, it's about accountability.
It is, but
also,
we need to answer the questions before they jump in with others, and you keep stopping us from answering.
No, sir. Hold on. To be fair, in the spirit of fairness, as a public servant, you clearly, if you live in this country,
yes,
you must be able to empathize with a sense of anger and impatience that the public has. You yourself have said that your institutions suffer from a lack of publicity. Right? You're not able to push forward, put forward messages of what you've been able to achieve. But here, we're telling you, and the people are here, they're telling you, we are dissatisfied with the rate at which you're performing. I believe it's only fair to allow that, and I'm here not in my own capacity, but as the voice of the people. This is my job, to ask the questions and to make sure they're answered. And so to you, sir, one last question.
Yeah, sure.
Again, the question I've just asked him, can you appreciate the anger, the sense of helplessness that people feel if me, as Kinuthia down the street, can be able to not only observe this crime observe this crime, investigate myself. I don't know those processes. I don't know the processes. I don't know the mandate of IPOA. I don't know. But me, as just a guy on the street, I'm able to see this and go as far as to identify these officers and identify exactly what law they've contravened. If they can do that in a matter of hours, as clumsy and as inefficient as that is, can you understand the sense of anger that why is it taking IPOA, for example, so long to get these cases to completion? Can you understand that?
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, and that is why it was important for me to explain the process. Because unlike you, who is an individual, entities created by law are structured within the law. They can only operate within the structures that are set in law. Otherwise, if they go beyond those structures and processes that are set in law, they operate ultra vires the law. Okay? And that is why it was important for me to set out the structure.
Okay.
That's right.
And even as they do that, they contradict each other. Latest, case that Makoure mentioned in relation to the letter that was released by the side of the nominated CS, that is Oparanya, in relation to, of course, his cases and all that. EACC saying this, and of course ODPP on the other hand saying that. Where is the element of not complementing, or if complementing, where is the element of synchrony? If a letter is going to come from this office to this office and to the office and going round and contradicting, I mean, what are we talking about?
Thank you, Alela. Sorry, I got a little agitated.
No worries.
I think it's important that you have an opportunity to allow us to answer the questions. Let me start by saying this. I am born and raised in Obunga slums of Kisumu. I lost my uncle from police brutality in a police cell. So I'm not detached from the reality. Let me start from saying that. Having said that, there's a difficulty in the difference in the mandates of the offices that you are looking at. The ODPP purely does what we call prosecution. And Article 157.6 delineates the functions of the DPP clearly. It says, under Sub-Article A, institute and undertake criminal proceedings. Under Sub-Article B, discontinue proceedings. Sorry, take over proceedings that have been instituted by other people. And C, discontinue. What the DPP does is almost at the tail end, just before we get to the judiciary. We expect and we rely on investigations from investigative agencies, including IPOA, ESCC, and the DCI, or the National Police Service generally. Now, let me give you an example why we say that publication would be maybe one of the problems for the offenses in Kisumu's, Obunga, and Nyalenda estates. So that shows you that even the information that is out there is not factual, number one. Number two, you are told about Baby Pendo only. Willie Kimani was a victim of police brutality, successfully prosecuted with the assistance of IPOA. Secondly, other than that, in corruption cases, we had Waluke, sentenced to 110 years.
He's in
out right now because of a right to be out because he applied for bail pending appeal. I am lucky to have handled and those that. Cases have been publicized.
Yes,
proper.
it was.
Okay.
Other than that,
you handled it.
I handled the Waluke case. I handled it at the Court of Appeal. We are waiting for a judgment in December. Other than that, you remember Mike Sonko, Ferdinand Waititi Babayao, and who else? When we went all the way, again, I was lucky to be in that matter, to the Court of Appeal to ensure that governors who are found to have violated Chapter 6 cannot get back to their offices.
But they are now in cabinet.
Right.
No. The work of the DPP is to simply prosecute. Whether a person after prosecution then gets back to cabinet or whether they are released on bail is beyond our mandate. Is that clear? Having said that, let me talk about the independence and accountability of the office of the DPP. Article 157, sub-article 10 says that in the exercise of our mandate, the DPP is not under the control or direction of anyone. Well enough, granted it says that is what is on the paper. But just like Inoti says, what we shall be judged with in court or amongst the Kenyan people is the law provides this on one hand. What you are doing is not what the law provides. That is the test. So that we shall always remain guided by what the Constitution says. Now, that is on independence.
Before you even take it further,
yes.
If your mandate then is whitewashed
yes.
by activities of other independent offices, in the sense that you say your mandate ends at this point, then of course if this person is picked for or nominated for a certain position, well, you have nothing to do with that. Don't you think it is probably even unfair to you people who spend time and time to investigate, to reach a certain element of procurement, or perhaps to reach a certain element of saying that, well, this is how the case goes and everything, and then you realize that this person released out there then of course gets a mandate to handle another very important office, contrary to what it is that then you would have prosecuted?
No. I don't see it that way. The Constitution deliberately separated functions under it, so that the judiciary is up there to ensure that even those who are charged and prosecuted for offenses are prosecuted in accordance with the law. There's a right to fair trial.
All right, allow us to take a short break on that note and then come back, so that you can enlighten us some more after this break.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
The People's Court, and Owiti, we come back to you, but of course not before reading this message, and I'm sure you are responding to it as well, but it's only fair that we appreciate the people who are watching us from home. And Gikonyo says that really, if you needed publicity, or perhaps if you did what it is that you're supposed to do right, I doubt you will need any form of publicity. We appreciate the position of PR in all these institutions, but we equally understand very well if they have executed what they're supposed to execute as per the Constitution, it will speak for itself.
I agree. I agree with the...
Public prosecution or public photography.
Can I answer?
All right, let him
Take
answer.
it easy now. We come back to you. Owiti, all right.
I agree with the person who said...
You know, they said, Kasmul, you shall not touch. So I don't know whether you saw that thing that was making rounds.
My younger brother.
If you touch that,
it's my younger brother. I can touch him.
Count for you.
I can occupy him gently. But yes, I agree with the person that it is not enough for us to say that there is little or no publicity. The trust deficit from the public is understandable. I must admit, and we are working towards becoming better. We haven't gotten there yet, but in the meantime, we are doing a lot behind the scenes. Sorry. So what I wanted to say about the question actually I wanted to ask Victor, which I can tell the public, is there are a number of times that you will see on media, these incidents, a police officer doing one or the other thing. I'll give you a better example. In the older times, a police officer by the name Kirui was seen in Kondele, which is my home, shooting live during post-election violence. Kirui was arrested. Then a question arose, and the lawyers in this room, other than Kinoti and I, would confirm to you that a question of admissibility of the evidence of that video arose. And that's why I wanted to ask you a question. If our investigators were to call you as a witness to show us what TV47 covered during the demos, would you be a witness? There are rules that prevent the media from being active witnesses in courts, right? If we can't have the person who took the actual video from TV47, it means we don't have the evidence. The public have seen that action on TV, but we can't have a witness who is a reliable witness to that incident who covered the video. Now that is one. Kinoti has told you about certificates of video evidence. Many of the Gen Zs are out there properly recording. And this is, I think, a question of a failure of the law on our part, because I've studied international criminal law, and in the ICC, you allow what we call, what's the name of it? The live videos can be used directly. But here, the Law of Evidence Act, Cap 80 of the laws of Kenya, requires that every video, including those small TikTok videos that you want to rely on, are only admissible in court if they were properly taken, and the makers of those videos write those certificates authenticating the videos. Now, what you will see on the TVs, on the TikToks, and on YouTube is different from what finally goes into evidence. So that when the court finally sits to analyze, assess, and evaluate the evidence, what has gone on the record is probably a tenth of what was available there. Now, yes.
Why is that?
Why is that? Is that we are guided by technical rules of evidence. What we have there is the facts. Other than the facts, when it comes now to judging, because the standard of proof of criminal cases is extremely high, beyond reasonable doubt, so that a criminal can go scot-free, not because they didn't commit the offense, but because the rules of evidence has locked some of the evidence. Now, this is something beyond the investigators. It is beyond the prosecution. Whose door does it stop at? Parliament, to then allow us to change
Just
or
not
review
work.
our laws of admissibility of evidence.
Could you talk to us? I think there was a question earlier on the subject of witness protection.
Yes, yes.
For example,
a very important one.
Indeed.
Now,
like the certificates you're requiring, would require a degree of protection for those who actually captured these images.
Yes.
Which is understandably why some people go underground.
Very important.
Getting snatched everywhere.
And we have cases of witnesses disappearing. Again, I'm not detached to the reality. In Kenya, we have witnesses disappearing. Or witness interference, where, Victor, I know you are the only witness against me in a case, and I come to you and give you some, bribe so that you relocate to Uganda or relocate elsewhere. And that informed why the Kenyan legislature came up with the Witness Protection Agency, where I am currently handling the Shakahola case in Malindi. And we have a number of witnesses, right, who are taken care of by the Witness Protection Agency, who ensure that they come to court when required and that they testify in these boxes, the protection, distortion of voices. So that we are encouraging members of the public that for us to prove cases in court, for our investigators to compile inquiry files, we need witnesses. I agree with Ndong that, you can't expose your witnesses on TV to say 1, 2, 3. But at the same time, we urge the Gen Zs, Kasmuel and team, and all members of public, if you have witnessed something on the ground, come to us. If you can't go to the police because of the fear, which is understandable, or you can't go to IPOA for whatever reason, you can come to the ODPP directly, who can then link you to the Witness Protection Agency. The agency itself has on their website, free contact lines where you can reach the agency direct and say, I think my life is in danger. Or it doesn't have to be you. How about you take a neighbor whom you think really witnessed? Because in courts, we don't talk about somebody told me. We want the person who actually saw and observed. That's when we will meet the rules of evidence.
Allow me to interject, and even as we bring in the issue of law, because when someone is being abducted and they're being taken, they do not have the time to really go through and get the numbers, because it is also an issue of the law. And I want you to bring in the legal voice. To what extent do we need to start? Are we looking at a constitutional moment where not only are we amending the over-representation, as we can see, because there has been that concern, but also to amend what these institutions, because at the end of the day, you can see him holding the Constitution and saying, we are guided by this document. So that then we, as he says, do we start looking at it, and then how do we get to push the legislature to amend the laws that govern us? Because over time, it's been now, 14 years that we've seen, okay, this constitution is working like this. And people have gotten clever over time in how they go around the law.
And just allow me to add to your question as he answers. There's this important question that affects what we are talking about. Article 50, sub-article 2, and this is, sub-article 4. And this is what it says. Evidence obtained in a manner that violates any right or fundamental freedom in the Bill of Rights shall be excluded if the admission of that evidence would render the trial unfair or would otherwise be determined to detrimental to the administration of justice. So that it doesn't matter if it is evidence against a police officer. If we obtain it irregularly or illegally, without the certificates, without the admissibility concerns, the Constitution itself excludes it.
But the police officers as well disappear people forcibly. They take people from restaurants and they still go ahead and get away with that evidence. Why is that admissible? Why is it admissible when it is a state organ that is doing it?
It is not.
But we've seen these things. We've seen people being forcefully. The other time they abducted the veteran journalist Maina Gaitho, and they issued a flimsy apology on Twitter again. Then they said that who they wanted was Francis Gaitho. But again, these things seem to be applying to the common mwananchi, but they don't apply to state organs. You see, that's the problem we have. We don't have a problem with your offices. What the problem we have is, are these laws? There are certain individuals or certain state organs that are above the law.
And so that Macharia Gaitho does not come for us, it is Macharia Gaitho.
Yes, that's what we said. No, I said Macharia.
You said Maina.
Okay. No, Macharia, sorry, Macharia Gaitho.
Okay. Thank you so much, Linda. I think for me, George, it is not about the Constitution itself. Okay. For me, I think, let us be honest, and they say facts are stubborn. I think for the Constitution has gotten absolutely everything right. But you see, the Constitution also contemplates that the people in power are sober and that they are alive to the participation of.
So sobriety is missing, of course.
Yes, and I would give you an example. I have said numerously on this show that this country can single-handedly be governed by Article 10. Article 10 is the morality. There are 22 basic values for this country that are enshrined there that can authoritatively govern this country without the need of any other provision. But the bigger problem with this institution, you asked whether it is a time we need to reconsider our laws in regards to how some of these institutions work. It is true that we need time to reconsider a number of our provisions, just like I agree with JV that we need to do that. But the institution that is mandated to do that is busy with other things, increasing perks for themselves. They are busy with the finance bill. They are busy with, with other things. So I think the priorities of Parliament for a long time has, been a waste, a complete, total waste in the eyes. For IPOA, I think IPOA has agitated a number of times. So of course, I'm not saying they are doing well. IPOA is absolutely doing poorly. I have said if there is an agency that is doing poorly is IPOA and NCIC.
Wait till you find out about the Kenyan Parliament.
I'll talk about NCIC another day. But for instance, IPOA, I think they have agitated for a long time that they need to be given mandates to arrest, it's part of the investigation. What happens is that IPOA has the investigative role, but do not have the authority to arrest. So they rely on the same police service that they are investigating to do for them arrest of similar police officers. And that is a big challenge. Again, for the ODPP, and I will repeat this again, the ODPP, and it is now time for the ODPP to go and reassess, and I've not seen JV actually respond to that, go and reassess the manner in which they drop cases. The ODPP has done many things. They have gotten many things right. And the reason why I'm still saying that publicity is not an issue is because the ODPP does well, but they do well in matters that don't matter. In matters that matter, they do absolutely nothing, completely nothing in matters that matter. You see, we saw Oparanya being nominated as a CS the other day, and then a few days they write a letter. We are not saying that they abused their mandate, but we are saying if you look at the timing of that letter, then there is an extraneous agenda into it. So I think it is time for us to review our laws, but it is time for us also to actualize Article 10. Actually, if you look at this Gen Z movement and what it does, it simply tells the government agencies, let us comply with Article 10. For instance, the National Police Service Commission that has the mandate to ensure that the police officers do well in their duty, they follow the law, they don't engage in gross misconduct, has been ruffling feathers with IPOA for the longest. They have an internal it's called IAU unit that deals with misconduct of police officers. IPOA has its mandate. Whenever IPOA wants to do investigation, they say this matter is with IIA, and then they go on and compromise and get this. So I think the mandate of IIU and IPOA needs to be crystallized so that we do not have that tension. But all this requires somebody in power, somebody in authority. And that is why the Baby Pendo case is very important. The Baby Pendo case is about international crimes and command responsibility, that somebody was in charge. Somebody took responsibility. If we saw police officers in the public masked, somebody was in charge. If we saw David Chege's brain outside, being spilled outside Parliament, somebody is in charge. And it boils to Article 10, accountability. Can somebody be accountable? The National Police Service has failed us. Even the Witness Protection Agency has failed us. They have not done so much. In this country, it is about trust. You will come out and say, I will testify. And then the next day you come out, you are found in Rivayala. The next day, their current Rivayala is city mortuary, where they dump, on accident cases, people who have been killed and having bullet wounds. So that trust deficit emanates from the fact that agencies, George, are not able to take responsibility and are not able to comply with Article 10. The Gen Zs are not asking angels from heaven to come and govern this country. They are saying, let the IG take accountability under Article 10, ensure that police officers are identifying themselves. They are saying, let IPOA not be reactive. We are tired of statements of we are sorry, we are concerned to have noted. We want to see people on the ground. Statements and statements and statements. And lastly, George, yes. Africa has had enough meetings. Let us act.
Okay. Indeed. Your sentiments. I mean, a lot has been said.
And as Tatiana, as you speak, perhaps just to speak to the fact that as well, KHRC handles almost similar concerns in relation to, what these other independent bodies actually look at. We're talking about human rights, we're talking about social justice, we're talking about accountability. If at all you feel you have done the right thing as KHRC, what is this that you have done that is so unique that gets you or gets your entity then serving the people as should be, that perhaps they should borrow from?
So, so much has been said. I'm actually trying to pick up the conversation from everyone, bring up some questions. He brought up Article 157, and my question is it read, you know how you read the Bible and you read the first chapter before you read the second to understand the third? Is it being read in separate, exactly? Because the same article does mandate IPOA to carry out its functions and its mandate according to, let's say, how do I say this? Yes, to have regard in public, with public interest and administration of justice. At the end of the day, we're talking about prosecution-aided acquittals. We're talking about the case of Oparanya. Why is he still out there? Like, we've heard you say you do your part, yeah? So why is it not being seen? Why is it not being seen? As KHRC, we've talked about so many issues tying to integrity of these people in these offices. We've liaised with the National Integrity Alliance. We've written so many statements. We have actively taken to the streets as individuals, standing up for these things. But at the end of the day, our work can, in fact, we've actually been threatened. We've been publicized and noted to be financing, in quotes, this protest. If anything, it's everyone. Everyone is annoyed. It's a faceless movement. Everyone is annoyed. I am annoyed. We're taking the streets not only because of, we're taking the streets because of our individual concerns as Kenyans. So as KHRC, our mandate is to ensure that even as people take to the streets, human rights are at the end of the day respected. And with these institutions in power, we're not seeing that in case and point. Yeah, they're speaking about carrying out their activities, carrying out their work, but we're not seeing it. And that's our main concern. We're calling for accountability, if anything. Let's see your work in paper and in action.
Wanjohi, before you cross over to Shiko.
I think my concern is nane. Are we still going to see police officers masked? Are we going to see live bullets being used? And I know he said his work, their work is to write letters. But what happens if will IPOA have people on the streets investigating the conduct of the police officers who will be on the streets that day? Because that's extremely important. And what happens, for instance, we've seen a police officer shooting at journalists, and I know you said you're not using video evidence, but what happens, why is that police officer still allowed to go back to the streets for the next demonstrations? I'm very concerned with nane because the Kenyans who will come out will be exercising their rights. And your work is to really oversight. And we cannot continue having the same problem over and over again. Since 20th of June till now, we are talking about worsening situation with how the police are handling citizens who are expressing their anger and exercising their constitutional right. Okay. So my big concern really is nane, which is a day after tomorrow.
We'll come to Kasmil. Shiko, you've been angling to speak.
We read the Constitution like it's isolated from Article 1 of the Constitution. And I know someone else has also mentioned Article 10 of the Constitution. But if the sovereign power belongs to the people, then it means if the laws do not work for the people, they must be amended to work for the people. What I hear our fellows from IPOA and ODPP saying, they're just telling us in so many words that they're toothless. They're just telling us that in so many words, they're not able to guarantee Kenyans accountability, and they're not able to guarantee Kenyans justice. Unfortunately, they're the bodies that we have to go to because there's a constitutional mandate for them to do that. I hear them saying again and again that they have a problem in publicizing issues and want to just retaliate what someone said, that it's not your job to tell us what to do. We will see if you're doing it. And we do not need to follow up. You mentioned Willie Kimani's case. It took so long because when Willie Kimani was killed, I was barely a child. And by the time he got justice, I'm a whole grown woman with kids. So it does really not, it doesn't make sense, because we always say justice delayed is justice denied. So this family had been coming to court every other day, year in, year out, for them to actually get justice years later. It does not make sense. I sit here and I pain a lot for the families of the over 300 Kenyans who've died. And I think we keep saying that bullets are marked, bullets have numbers. So if then video evidence is not admissible, what about these bullets that shoot these people? Do they also come back and collect all the cases? We still have these bullets in hospitals, and sometimes, like one of the cases, the hospitals do not allow you to carry the bullets home after their body. Mm-hmm. What does this mean, and how can people actually now hold these people accountable? Because I feel like there's a lot of screaming that IPOA and ODPP must be held accountable. Because then there's a lot of corners in the good English they're speaking to hide the truth from Kenyans, unfortunately. I sit here and I ask myself, Kenyans barely trained, have not gone to school to study investigations and criminology, can actually identify these people who are masked, get a phone number and a badge number, and put it out there. How hard can it be for these institutions to actually get a bullet number?
Okay.
I don't understand, and I feel like after this call I'm left helpless as a Kenyan, and I feel sorry for so many of us who really bank on these people to kind of protect us and give us the accountability that Kenyans need.
Don't feel sorry, my comrade. We will fix this. Give me a day. We will go on the streets to make this right, fellow comrades. Whatever is happening, I empathize with my brothers who are sitting on the other side, that the institutions have placed them in such a compromising situation, and whatever it is that looks as public outrage should be directed to the institution. I need you guys to understand that we are not attacking you guys, but we are attacking the entire institution because it's not functioning to sort the Kenyans. We are heading into a turning point for this country in about a day. A lot has been done, and today we've done, from the conduct we've seen from the police force, I insist on calling it a police force, because until they start acting as a service, there's no need for us to call them that, because that is how the language is used to water down the exact situation. Is that just the same way people say that people died of the protests? No, people died of police brutality. Based on the actions that we have witnessed today, the violent displacement of citizen assemblies that were not even demonstrations. These were peaceful people who are sitting down. They were not even demonstrating. These were communities organizing. If that is what can happen to people who are sitting in a room, what about this nane, which we are saying is the total overhaul? Because I have the solution. I think I have the solution very clearly. The constitution actually, right now, it can be summarized in one problematic hashtag: Ruto must go. These are my opinions, not the opinions of the media house. That Parliament as it sits is unconstitutional, and the president should dissolve it and call for a general election, which in effect leads to his resignation. The only way then now we sort out this mess is when we drain the entire system and transform that police force into a police service. Because we look at these organizations and we see IPOA sounding so cornered and so bound to letter writing, as though they were wooing a lover. And these are people who do not take care, and you find that their internal mechanisms do not allow IPOA to need their mandate. IPOA should have been proactive if they're talking about a PR crisis. By right now, they should have given us statistics saying, based on what we see, because now you need to give me faith in your investigative capabilities. You should have told us right now, this is our projection on police conduct for what is going to happen, what is going to be Nane, because Nane has been in the public domain. Part of what we keep on seeing, and even when we go to ODPP, it's not even a timing problem. You find that maybe they wrote the letter, now they try and say, oh, now we had written it on 5th, we just submitted it this particular day. All these institutions have been reduced to it's an extra layer of protection for the bureaucracy, and that is what we are going to sort out on Thursday. Whether or not they act within the edicts of the law, there will be no police officer who will show up masked on the streets. I want to assure Kenyans that anybody who shows up masked on the streets when we will be there on Thursday is not a police officer and shall be dealt with as such. Any car that comes with an obfuscated number plate, we shall treat those people as robbers. Even worse, if a Subaru shows up on the streets without number plates, we shall know that these people are people who've come to abduct us. Because now we're living in an active crime scene where we even find Caucasians wielding automated rifles. So we as Kenyans, because these institutions have shown us that all they can do is write letters. All I can do as well is speak, because everyone is contributing. I ask fellow people, if you can write, please let us join IPOA and ODPP in writing letters. But I will assure you as a Kenyan that on Nane, nothing of the sort is going to happen. We are tired. That retreat which we've seen that they went to, if a police officer, and we find out that you're an officer of the law, you show up masked on the streets, we shall deal with you accordingly, and then we shall have IPOA write letters and ODPP try to prosecute.
All right, right. Let's have a gentleman from IPOA to respond to some of the questions that have been asked as we get ready to wind up.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, feedback is good and also gives us an opportunity to clarify. I think a lot has been said about accountability and writing letters. It is not writing letters that have led to cases like Willy Kimani, that have given justice to cases like Martin Kome Manyara, that have given justice to cases like Kwekwe Mandaza. It is investigations conducted by IPOA. Clear, concise, meticulous investigations that reach the burden of proof of beyond reasonable doubt that the courts have found. It is not writing letters that led to the High Court and confirmed by the Court of Appeal handing out a death sentence to an OCS for the killing of Martin Kome Manyara. It is clear, concise investigations conducted by IPOA. But how can we make this happen with regard to this mandamano? How can we do this? IPOA has an investigative mandate, but IPOA cannot create evidence. So that is why we are calling upon all Kenyans. If you have witnessed something happen, if you have taken a video, please do come forward to us and record a statement. Help us conduct these investigations to hold police officers accountable. IPOA cannot create evidence. Evidence comes from the persons who are at the scene. And that is the law. And that is why we are calling upon you. We're not just saying write to us letters or post on social media. Come to us.
All right.
We protect our witnesses. We will protect you. Give us that information, record a statement, and you will see accountability.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, and perhaps as you sum it up, I am told from Bungoma, the personnel in the so-called independent institutions and themselves, or are themselves never independent personalities in nature. And you mentioned something to do with bribery. I mean, one would want to ask, what are some of the, credentials that, of course, are called for individuals to be, incorporated or perhaps to be, part and parcel of these independent entities? Because if we're going to talk about cases of bribery, why don't we deal with these individuals that are messing up the name of the institutions?
I need to clarify from the onset that the bribery I was referring to is there have been cases where witnesses have been interfered with. You are a witness in my case. You have a case in October, let's say October.
Yes.
The accused person knows that you are the only bridge between them and liberty. They'll do all they could to reach you. And even if it means they buy you off. And I may not mention names, but we have had very many cases of witness interference.
The same way we've had allegations that, of course, officers...
Yes, which I'm now coming to, because you ask a very fundamental question. Other than the independence of these institutions, for every independence, the other side of the coin is accountability. So when you get into the independent office, and I'll talk about ODPP, one of the things that you must do is you must be found to meet Chapter 6 of the Constitution, which may look very general, but the people that do interviews ensure that at least you show some signs of integrity and that you meet, the ethics and the edicts of the Constitution in terms of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Having said that, there's something that Shiko mentioned, which I think I should clarify before I lose it. We did not say that video evidence is not admissible. What I have been saying is that there are parameters for such evidence to be admissible. And I said one of the challenges is, for example, we cannot get media personnel to come and testify as to the videos they have recorded, because probably it's against their ethic, their code of conduct. Again, you cannot just go to Facebook and say, this video is trending of a police officer shooting. And that's where we are pleading with the members of the public. Our cases rely, other than on the forensic evidence and documentary evidence, our cases mainly rely on witnesses. And we are saying, and I can testify to it because I have done, we are doing the Baby Pendo case together. I am doing Shakahola, 4 cases, Malindi, Mombasa, Tononoka, and Shanzu. And we have seen the good work that the Witness Protection Agency, with all its limitations, is doing currently. Let us encourage Gen Zs who will be out there on Nane Nane, and I join you in the concern that when you are out there and you are able to take photos, you are able to take videos, don't shy away. Look for whatever agency you think is more friendly. You could reach to me also directly. I assure you that if it comes to me, the identity is kept. So that these videos, once Kasmuel comes with a video that he recorded of a suspected police officer masked, and we are able later on to unmask him, I'll just tell Kasmuel, sign for me the certificate, so that Section 106 Capital B of the Evidence Act, which says this video evidence is not admissible without the certificate, we shall have therefore surmounted that difficulty, so that we have not just the witness testimony, we have forensic evidence in terms of the ballistic reports, and also we have certificates for the videos. That makes sense?
There's a story we have carried here,
yes.
And quickly because we have to close, by our very own Sheila. And she spoke to some Gen Zs or perhaps individuals that were involved in these processes of, say, Mandamano, and they said that they presented their evidence and were shunned away.
Yes.
We would want to say these are claims, but what goes into such a thing? Especially, they said that these were presented to IPOA.
So I will not speak for IPOA, he will. But what I know is that we will receive, investigating agencies receive all manner of materials. But for the ODPP, when we receive a file and I see a video, a CD, a disc, indicating, for example, what is currently happening, and I find that there is no certificate, what I'll do, and Kinoti has said, we will return the file and specifically indicate that there is this gap. There are videos here, but we do not have certificates. You know the result of this. So, and let me touch that to the delay that Willie Kimani took a long time, that Shiko was a baby and she's now an adult when we got justice. I'd rather there is a delay in ensuring that we do it right than rush and mess up the evidential requirements. Then the judiciary will simply tell you, if you don't bring me the proper evidence, I'll throw it out. And then the public will cry more because a shoddy job was done. So let us take time and get it right, so that when we finally get that conviction, if it goes to the Court of Appeal, we are safe. Thank you very much.
George, back to you.
Absolutely. And, a lot has been said, but, that's, as we say, when we stop talking is when we start fighting. And of course, we check the feedback on X. I think we should, Jeremiah Gary, I think we should do away with these institutions, IPOA, and all these others. If they can't handle cases conclusively, why waste money paying them? Of course, challenge and feedback that I'm sure our guests here will be able to take to their colleagues and the institution at large. A lot has been said on, on the socials as well. You just got me going through some of it, but we want to thank you, all of you, for being able to join us, and we want to hand to Shiko just briefly a minute or two for the closing remarks, even as we look at the topic tonight, the nation's future in focus. Do you see a situation where perhaps things will continue to shape up differently?
Of course, things will shape up differently, and I hope for the good. Kenyans have decided that Kenya is our home and it's a business, and we must fix it for the sake of our future and that of our kids. So yes, things will shift. Yes, things will get better by the day. We must hang in there. We must keep going. We must not stop, because ultimately this Kenya is our country, and we must not allow people who perceive, or rather people who we elect into power, then take away our future or steal our future from us. So I am eagerly waiting to see the new Kenya. And I think, as Mel keeps saying, it's time we reimagine the new Kenya. And I think the new Kenya is a beautiful country, is a fair, is a just, and is a country where systems work for the people. Systems are run by the people.
Absolutely. Shiku Keheka, Executive Director, Tribe-Based Youth, thank you so much for joining us on this side of the panel. We've had Ndong Evans, Constitutional Law Analyst, as well as Wanjohi Njoroge, Youth and Nature Consultant, Tatiana Jenga, lawyer from KHRC, as well as Kasmuel Makaure, activist. Thank you so much.
Kasmuel, I hope
for joining us.
Those were not live threads to individuals that will be out there IPOA their lives, because then...
There is no live threat that is happening, but I would want to assure Kenyans, because whatever is happening, the reason why we are gathered in this studio is because there's a current movement that's happening in the country, and not to cheapen it in any way, but what we are saying, and I want to state it categorically clear, nane kabla ya saa nane is going to happen. It happens in a day. We have witnessed the excesses of the police to the point of death. What we are saying consistently, and because we know that everyone is spinning a narrative, and the investigative authorities suddenly have intelligence that things are going to be infiltrated, but they have no idea how to deal with it. We are saying to the police force, before it becomes a police service in the new republic that we will be agitating for, on Thursday, if we see a person riding in an obfuscated government vehicle, a government vehicle purporting to be a police officer, and they are masked and they do not identify themselves while wielding guns, we will know that either the state sanctions violence against its people, or that we are dealing with thugs. And if we are dealing with thugs, if the police will not defend us, we will have to defend ourselves. But I'm here to assure Kenyans that I know this will not happen. We will not see the goons that have been wielding weapons on the streets. So if you're coming out on the streets, this is the assurance that we have from the discussion we've had tonight. That will not happen.
It will be a
But in the event that it happens, we the people shall...
put a disclaimer. We put a disclaimer to that. George, we must close. It will, and it will be peaceful. We all hope for that.
Yes.
George, as we come to a close, allow us to say kwaheri to the people, and then, of course, over to you. My name is Linda Lele. It was great having you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for that.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of you for coming in and sharing your feedback and your insight. I say this a lot, but perhaps the conversation is bigger than the time that we've had. But I thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. It's a big step for these institutions to come forward, to be asked difficult questions, and to attempt to answer those difficult questions. Thank you so much. I hope you'll pick up our calls next time. Come. Thank you, Shiko, wherever it is that you're watching us from and contributing. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies. And to the people at home, thank you for participating, sending in your feedback, but also lending us your ears and eyes tonight. We hope this discussion has been worthy of your attention. My name is Victor Moyakane. Good night and God bless you.
Indeed, I am George Maringa. Thank you for watching. As always, stay safe and be kind to one another.
Join Maybets leo upate free bet papo hapo. Fanya hivi, chagua home team to win, yani number 1 au draw X au away team 2 kwa game ya siku ya free bet. Weka namba yako ya simu, weka password ya account yako, chagua submit free bet. Utapata free bet kwa account yako ya Maybets. Usisahau kuverify account yako. Kama hutakuwa verified, utapoteza free bet yako after 2 days. Betting is strictly for 18 years and over. Play responsibly. Terms and conditions apply. BCLB number 00005 578.
Bet na minia na najishindia. Pesa inavutia.
Woi kai.
Guy, huyu ni bwana ya mtu anapiga nduru hivyo.
You were saying uliolewa ukiwa how old?
I was 19.
19 years. Ulikuwa katoto.
Ile ya mgani joke ya unaenda kutembea kwa mtu. Sasa mimi akanipa hiyo joke. Hata msiende, kuna kwingi za kulala nikamwambia
hiyo ndio inaitwa own goal.
So siku moja tukakaa hapo hivyo nikamwambia by the mimi si date. Siku tu manzi yangu kaniambia kwani nimekuwa.
Ala.
Huyo alikuwa ameshajituma.
Alikuwa shaji.
The following program is rated PG. Parental guidance is advised.